The word clear is showing up a lot these days, and a lot of different organizations are using it, and I think it means different things to different people, but the way I think about it is that we live in a world where we've been trained to assume that it's not okay to come to you when I'm not making sense of you and I'm not having a very good experience of you and to figure out what's going on in your head. Instead, we've been trained to go talk to other people about it and we make up a story about you. And I think that that is such a normal, natural process that we don't even notice it anymore. And I think that process is the core of why so many of our organizations are mediocre and so many are less than what they could be. And in my world, the idea of clarity and clear leadership is just about getting rid of the mush. It's about not operating on our stories as if they're the truth, but recognizing that it's just a story and just going to you and finding out if my story is true or not and getting clear. And the research I and my students have done has demonstrated that about 4 out of 5 times, problems that are causing dysfunctional patterns in an organization are simply based on the mush. And that if you clear that out, if people just clear out their story, the problem goes away. So much of what appears to be conflict is not really conflict. It's these stories that get made up and acted on as if they're the truth. So getting clear is about clearing out the story. I think that most leaders that I work with, and that's a problem because only certain people ask me to work with them, right? So, but the leaders I work with desperately want to be in collaborative and partnership-based relationships, spend a lot of time worrying about how to do that, experience themselves not having a lot of success at it, and so they make up a story about the people who work for them, about them being unmotivated or incompetent or so on and so forth. And what they don't recognize is that it's their own patterns of behavior that they've learned to do to become leaders that are getting in the way. And so most fundamentally, I think the biggest problem is the tendency of leaders to take responsibility for other people's experience. So as soon as I do that, then what I do is I create a situation where it becomes uncomfortable for you to have an unapproved experience, because as soon as that happens, I step in and try to manage your experience for you. And when people are trying to manage my experience, then what I learn to do is to keep my experience to myself, right? And not to describe it. I think, in any group, what's going on is you have a multiplicity of experience taking place. Everybody's having their own experience because everybody creates their own experience. And ask 5 people what happened at a meeting, you get 5 different stories of what happened at that meeting. So what leaders need to do to create a climate of clarity is to allow people to just have their own experience and not feel like they're responsible for changing it, managing it, making it better. I think once they learn that, it's very easy for them to act on it, and it's liberating. Because also, I don't have to make you feel better. I'm not responsible for your experience. You're responsible for your experience. What it does do is it makes it okay, because not only are you responsible for your own experience and I don't have to manage it, but you're going to be having a different experience than I am. Obviously you are, because everybody creates their own experience. So everybody's experience is different. So I don't have to worry about everybody having the right experience. There's no such thing, right? Very liberating. So all the leaders I've worked with who've learned this way of thinking have been able to step into it very rapidly, unless they're caught up in needing to control other people's experience, to be seen in a certain way, to be experienced a certain way, that sort of thing. In order for people to be willing to tell the truth of their experience to each other, which I think is essential for a collaborative organization, and it's essential for being able to sustain a partnership. And I define a partnership as a relationship in which both people feel responsible for the success of what they're doing. Now, what leaders have to constantly work against is the natural tendency to want to make the leader responsible for success. Right? And so that means sustaining a relationship where we're willing to tell each other what we really think and feel about things. The problem is most people have learned that if I tell you what I really think, things get worse, they don't get better. And the reason for that is that when most people think about being open and honest, what next comes out of their mouth is their judgments of the other, because that seems to be what's top of mind. So I go, okay, I'll tell you what I really think, you're not really motivated and you're not really doing a very good job and you're kind of scared to really step out. And it's all about you. That is not very skillful. Okay? This is the problem of not being skillfully transparent. And I think in order to create climates of clarity, there are some basic skills that are required in how we communicate with each other so that we get clear about each other's experience. And it's not about being open and honest. And it's not about telling you my whole story. And it's not about telling you everything I think. But what it is about is this. If I don't tell you what's going on in my head, you're going to make up a story about it. As a leader, those are my two options. I can tell you what's going on in my head, or you can make it up. And the problem is the story you're going to make up is going to be worse than the reality, so I'm better off to tell you what's really going on in my head. But what you need to know is not my judgment of you. What you need to know is my experience of you. And that's what being skillfully transparent is about being able to describe my experience in a way that makes me understandable to you and supports our relationship and our partnership together. For example, it's not useful to tell you that you're annoying. You know, I say you're annoying, that's a judgment. What are you going to do about that? I mean, you can feel bad about it, you can argue with me about it, it doesn't get us anywhere. But if I say something to you like, you know, what I notice happening to me when I'm with you is that I'm not feeling like I'm being listened to, and after a while I feel like just walking away because, you know, you keep interrupting me. So what I described there is my experience of you, right? Not my judgment of you. And it's learning to do that. And this is this is not a simple thing, because judgments are packaged experiences. We have a series of experiences together, we stick them all together, we come up with a nice tight label, and we put it on the other person. It simplifies our thinking. And we're trained to think that way. And there's nothing wrong with judgment. In fact, we need discernment. Discernment's important. But it's about how I communicate it to you. And just telling you my package, how I put it all together, here's my label and stick it on you, well, one thing I know for sure is you're going to have a different judgment of yourself, right? That's not going to be your judgment of yourself. So if I stand in the position of, well, my judgment's the truth, you know, then partnership goes out the window again. I'm not really owning that. Well, I create my experience, you create your experience. But if I operate, well, I create my own experience. Okay, I create my own judgments. They're my judgments. So what? Are they any useful to you? No. But what is useful to you in being in partnership with me is understanding the experiences I'm having and how they support our partnership or get in the way of our partnership. And that's what being skillfully transparent means. My next book on the engaging manager is going to look then at how do I use my power and sustain our partnership. So it's more about the managing the performing part. And to me, the really interesting question here has been, how do I as a manager do the things that are required of me, both by the organization and by the people who work for me, and do it in a way that doesn't destroy their sense of partnership, which is a relationship in which we both feel responsible for the success of what we're doing here. And I think there's a common story to what happens to most managers. When people first become a manager, they say, I'm going to be a participative manager. And so they try to engage everybody in making a decision. And, well, that doesn't work. Because if you try to engage a whole lot of people in making the same decision, it takes too long, everybody has a different point of view, you never get around to the decision. After a while, the people who work for that manager get very fed up with them and say, will you please just make a decision? Which they do. At which point everybody gets upset. How could you make a decision? Well, you know, you didn't include me. At that point, you know, the manager goes, that's it with this participating thing, I'm going to do something different. Right? And again, it's a skill set. It's a skill problem around how, you know, what are the key things that because of authority in an organization I have to do, not just because the people above want me to do them, people below me want me to do them, but do them in a way that sustains a relationship in which we both feel responsible for the success of whatever project or process we're engaged in. And one of the tough things for managers is to not suck up the responsibility, which is it's very similar to the problem of taking responsibility for the other's experience. It's also taking responsibility for all the things that happen in my unit, you know, that sort of thing. I think there are a series of key things that we expect our leaders to do, and they need to figure out how to do those things in a way where they don't end up trampling on other people's sense of responsibility for the success. And these are things like, how do we set goals? How do we make decisions? How do we manage and allocate resources? And most fundamentally, how do we hold people accountable? You know, one of the things that drives employees crazy is when they have a highly participative leader who doesn't hold anybody accountable. And then they go, well, how come this person gets away with all this stuff, and then what does that do to my motivation, and so on and so forth. And so what this new book's going to look at is, well, what are the skills? And I don't think they're that complicated, but I think, again, they take a different attitude, a different perspective to what it means to lead and follow in 21st century organizations.